Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, was the sequel to Knights of the Old Republic 1, which I call the Jedi Civil War. It's the sequel, and it was made by Obsidian Entertainment, and it takes place during the first Jedi Purge, in the middle of it, where the Sith Triumvirate, led by Darth Sion, Darth Nullius, and later Darth Triana, would try to eliminate the Jedi, and then would presumably turn on each other at the end game, because that's how all the Siths fall apart. They eventually turn on each other because their lust for power. Now, this game is not as good. This game is not as good as Knights of the Old Republic 1. I mean, like, if this was made today, then I'm pretty sure it would have been much better, but because there were certain issues with development cycle, how it was delayed, and then they had to rush development to Christmas, and LucasArts was pressuring them. Now, this game is very famous, not for the reasons you think, if you've never played or heard of KOTOR 2, or don't follow the expanded universe anymore because it's non-canon and therefore you don't care. But this game is very famous not for the story, not for the characters, though the story is okay and the characters are okay, but it's more of what we didn't get is what made it famous. There is an article on Wikipedia where it's dedicated to show a list of cut content from Knights of the Old Republic 2. This game had so much cut content. There were companions, there were storylines, even the entire planet, M478, a droid planet, which would have been awesome to see, because I'm thinking, well, if they brought this into the Clone Wars series, it would have been awesome to see Count Dooku attempt to try and take over that planet, and droids are fighting them, and it'd be droids versus droids. That actually would have been awesome. And there were not just character stories, cutscenes, but also alignments, bigger stakes, like really effed up stuff that would determine various fates of characters. And you also would have gotten more exposition, more background on certain characters that you didn't get to know, like Atris. Like, they cut Atris where he was supposed to be a main antagonist until they just went with Kreia, revealing herself to be Darth Triana. But originally, under certain circumstances, it would have made Atris the villain in the story, who becomes the new Darth Triana. And they said, oh, well, you see, the reason why we cut that out is because, well, you see, it would just be weird that she would have Sith robes. And I'm thinking, wait, but she has Sith holocrons. Wouldn't that be dangerous compared to Sith robes? In fact, wait, why didn't you just, like, do this scene in Malachor where she dressed up as her Jedi self? When she enters the center, she transforms into Darth Triana. Oh, wait, there's a scene for that in the Restoration content, which I'll get to in a minute. Like, this game, the story was alright, the characters were alright. Like, we saw returns of 3 particular characters as your companions. Mandalore, aka Cantor's Auto, T3, and HK-47, who steals this entire game once again. Along with, we get Anton Rad, Bowder, Brianna, or the Handmaiden, the Disciple, Mikal, Murica. Like I said, this is Star Wars, I can't really pronounce it right. Goto, Hanar. But, like, it all depended on your alignment with the light and dark side and certain decisions that you made. You couldn't get this character if you played this, if you did this. You couldn't get this character if you were a male. You couldn't get this character if you were a female. And it would all, like originally they were supposed, like, you were supposed to get all the companions, probably except Hanar, because, well, he was the villain. He was a bad guy, a bad Wookiee. And he had a grudge from Marika, so I don't think that would have worked out. But you were supposed to get the Handmaiden, and regardless of the gender, Vissa, and all these different characters, all this story, all this content. It had LucasArts actually allowed Obsidian to go all out with this game to do this story, then this probably would have been their best game ever. Well, up until Fallout New Vegas, so that's debatable on that. So the story is just glitched up and whatnot. It's confusing at times. Like it's really confusing, and even then, the specific era, the First Jedi Purge, it's not really talked about as much. There's only like a select few of books, comics, maybe two at least, I think, and they don't reference these characters much. Like they would sometimes on occasion, and the last time they were talked about them was in the Legacy comics, where we see Darth Nihilus or Nihilus once more as a holocron spirit talking to Darth Krayt, talking about how he's violating the rule of two or disgracing the Sith, calling him a pretender, both speaking in his creepy voice language, and Bane and someone else refuses to translate it. So it's mostly famous for all his cut content. So Obsidian reportedly did try to get a content patch by restoring all that content. But for some reason, LucasArts refused to do that, and to this day, it's never been discovered why they didn't want to do that. And that resulted in a broken, glitchy experience with a solid story, but not as great as the story we could have gotten, and characters, motivations that were clunky at times and very confusing. Like when I was playing it, like Darth Kreia, not Darth Kreia, Darth Triana Kreia, as she was called. She's the popular character everyone remembers for. That's the one character everyone remembers for because of her philosophy with the Force. Like HK-47, he was the entertaining aspect. Darth Kreia, she was. Why did I keep saying Darth Kreia? Kreia or Darth Trianus. Um, Darth Triana, she was the philosophical, all the dramatic stuff going on. She was the fuel that lit the fire in the story. And I really loved their insight with the philosophy of the Force, but there was a lot of clunky motivation going on, like, like how, why did Scion and Nihilus to betray her? Like they highlight the Sith hunger for power, but then why did afterwards Scion took her back since, he cut off her freaking hand? Like, it was clearly not a game of charades, like, oh, let's trick these people, let's fool them into thinking this is all part of the plan. No, it didn't look like that. In fact, it looked like Scion wanted to kill her, which, if you play the game with her and you encounter Scion and get killed, he clearly does. So, was that part of the plan? It just confused me, and I don't think even the cut content ever explained that. We were also supposed to get this horn companion. I can't pronounce the species right, so I'm not even going to try. That was originally supposed to be in there, but then Mikau replaced him, or the disciple as he's called. Along with that, we were also supposed to get HK-50s and HK-51s. Bowder was supposed to get killed off. Like, there was supposed to be a Telos destruction the Telos Restoration Project was supposed to end disaster if you didn't do the specific objective. On the Ravager, where you don't get these proton energy cores to activate or fix them, then the ship Ravager would crash into the planet and all hell would break loose. And Alderaan, there's a civil war going on, and you have to investigate it. Like, all these different storylines, all these concepts, all these ideas they had, this could have made for a great game, a true successor. In fact, I would have said it could have been better than Knights of the Old Republic 1. And BioWare is the master of storytelling, at least was. We don't know if they still are, but we have to wait till Andromeda happens. But it is curious to know how much content there was so much taken from this. Like, I was talking to one of my friends before about this years back, and he told me how Half-Life 2 had the biggest amount of cut content ever made, and then I showed him this list and he said, I take it all back. Because he couldn't believe how much cut content was cut from the game and put on the side here. Like, oh, all this interesting stuff. Here's this clunky stuff. Here's all the interesting, cool stuff you could have gotten. But Lucasfilms and LucasArts decided to be jerks and rush us to Christmas 2004, which was just a year, so they only had a year. So if they had given them 2 years, things probably would have been different. And I never fully completed the game on the Xbox when I bought it. I bought it on PC later down the road, years later, and then I downloaded the Sith Lord Restoration content. Sorry, the Sith Lord Restoration content, and it was more enjoyable and more entertaining, and a lot of the glitches were fixed. Like we would see what was under what Kreia was hiding under her robes, under her hood, when she encounters Vandar, Master of Rook, and Zeskael. And you were supposed to get a fourth Jedi Master to help out, but she gets bit on M478, but they decide to kill her off on Korriban, or Moribond as it's now known. And then afterwards, they all get killed off, and like I just can't help but talk about the content. It's just so vast and big that it's surprising there's so much content. Like, it's the game we could have gotten but didn't. And it took fans to restore at least most of it. Along with that, there were supposed to be alignments with characters. Like, remember how in Knights of the Old Republic 1, you would get these alignments of light and dark or neutral? Even when I played it, I didn't notice anything different other than facial appearances, but, like, I didn't notice anything else different. But, like, did it change the story? It just made the character look more zombie-like. But in the vanilla version of Knights of the Old Republic 2, there was very little changes. Just facial appearances. But in Knights of the Old Republic 2 restored content, it would actually change up the story. It would alter characters' futures, it would alter characters' fates, everything you did altered everything. Like, you would learn the fates of Onderon, you would learn the fates of Dantooine, of Duxton, all these different places you visited. You would learn the fates of characters. Hanar would have been killed off if you side with him instead of Marika. Where he would sacrifice himself by throwing you onto the Ebon Hawk, which I never got into in the Knights of the Old Republic 1 because it just looks like the Millennium Falcon to me. That ship was nothing special to me. Like, it was like, oh, that's the Millennium Falcon 4,000 years ago. That's what I initially thought. That's the Millennium Falcon. It looks like the Millennium Falcon. It's just thicker. Ooh. Cool, I guess. And he would perish with Malachor 5, and, like, wait, where have I seen this before? Oh, guys, Chewbacca, and how he got crushed by a moon, and the planet was destroyed, and Vector Prime. That was a kick in the nuts, and a kick to our royal feels, since... And also, another content I found out was that you were supposed to originally train Hanar to be a Sith or Jedi with the Force. He was supposed to have the Force. He would have been the second Wookiee to have the Force power. The first one being Lobaka. But George Lucas had made an edict that said no more Wookiee Jedis or Sith. They couldn't do that. Like, I don't know why exactly, but ultimately I just went with it. Like, it did seem kind of weird to me when I say a Wookiee wielding a lightsaber, since they prefer to either use guns or with their bare fists. Or strangle people. Episode 5 ring a bell. And, man, there's just so much to talk about this game that I don't know how I could talk about all this in such quick timing. Like, you should definitely check out the article on the Wikipedia site. It shows a huge list, and there's even more in behind-the-scenes stuff regarding other companions. And there was also going to be character development, more character development than the ones we got. Like, we learned character development for a bunch of characters, but we did not learn enough, like, except for Anton Rad. But there were supposed to be conflicts with various characters between parties, like Baldur and Mandalore, because they fought in the Mandalorian Wars against each other. The Exile was a general in the Mandalorian Wars. That was the only info we got, other than her being exiled, because it was later canonized that in the Legends canon that she was a female. But the one thing that really took me away from this, that makes me remember this game more, is not just the content. It's the fact that every time when I look on the expanded universe and look as much information I can, they rarely ever talk about it. The future never really talks about it much. Like, the Exiles never talked about. Like, they mention it in Star Wars The Old Republic Revan, and the Exile, Mitria Shirik, that's her real name. appears in Star Wars The Old Republic MMO, but they never talk or mention anything about Kreia, Nihilus, Scion. Like, they don't talk about the first Jedi Purge. Like, you would think that would be a big deal the day the Jedi Order almost became extinct. They don't dismiss it entirely. Like, they reference it sometimes, but they don't talk about the exile specifically. And there are several theories why I could say why, but I'll get to that in a sec. Like how in 19 BBY, there was this Jedi Master in Coruscant in the Jedi Temple teaching some younglings how he had three theories of what was going on regarding the first Jedi Purge, where they said, oh, Brianna did it, the handmaiden girl. Vizamar did it. Atris did it. And I'm like, wait, you do realize the exile existed, right? And this leads to my first theory. What if, even after the exile saved their asses, even after her companions decided to help rebuild the Jedi Order, since most of them became Force-sensitive people, what if Jedi later down the road tried to erase the exile? Because they couldn't bring themselves to say, we made a bad decision in banishing the Jedi because she saved our lives. Like, what if that was one reason? The second reason is they don't like to talk about it because, well, it's a horrifying tale since so many people died. Like, especially if a planet gets ravaged in darkness in the comic. This is where you discover Vizamar, who is a Mariluka Jedi or Sith with no eyes, which was kind of frightening when I was a kid. And even my friend was frightened when he saw the picture of Vizamar without the robe covering her eyes, or lack thereof. But the third theory is because it was so clunky, so out of place, so out of pieces and whatnot, BioWare decided to not talk about it whatsoever. Like, they acknowledge it happened, but they don't want to talk about it because they don't know what really happened, because all this cut content, like they say, oh, this happened, that happened, this happened, this happened, to the point it's just all over the place. So, we may never know what the true history of Knights of the Old Republic 2 The Sith Wars would have been, since BioWare doesn't know, Lucasfilms doesn't know, LucasArts doesn't know, even Obsidian doesn't seem to know. Like, they try to restore it, like the fans seem to know at times, but they just get the basics. The exile recruited a bunch of companions, saved the Jedi Order, doesn't get talked about because she's the exile, and they don't want to talk about an exile that saved their asses, because the Jedi became this corrupted at this point, and then it just got worse later down the road for the next 4,000 years. And along with that, we learn various future events, like how the Republic eventually falls. Like, Kreia knows about this, and when the Exile tried to warn the Republic that she had encountered a vision of the later future, a future event where the Sith would eventually destroy the Republic, and I don't know if the Republic would believe her. They would be inclined to believe her because she helped them during the Mandalorian Wars and she really has no ulterior motives. Like, most of the Jedi who banished her are all dead. Atris, she's lived in ambiguity. We also get Carthonasi and Bastila, and they talk about Revan a lot. Like, I did find it interesting, like, at the time we didn't have, the save file transfer on the 360 and Xbox One that we have now, or PS3 and PS4, but ultimately, we had to go through exposition scenes to determine what the character of Revan was like in the previous games. So I thought, oh, now I get why they did that. Like, as a kid, I didn't know what the heck was going on. Like, I just played the character I did and just went with whatever dialogue that made sense to me. And, well, that's the direction I went with. Revan was a guy, the Exile was a woman. Like, that was how the story really worked. At least I played as a male. Like, I was a kid, and then I later played as the female because I wanted to get a better experience of how the canonical version went down, or at least try my best with it. But ultimately, Knights of the Old Republic 2 is not remembered for the right reasons, in my opinion. It's remembered for its cut content and its lack of mention. Like, they would bring back characters, like I said, on certain meetings, certain scenes, like Legacy with Nihilus. They would talk about it on occasion, but they would try to cut. It's like they try to cut things out. Like, okay, we can't mention the exile because that would disgrace us. We can't do this. We can't talk about this. Let's make up these stories. Do this, do that, do that, do that. Manipulation. So, everyone, those are my thoughts on Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords. This was Near Reality Entertainment. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and donate. Stay tuned for more.